I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Ah, Reylo. It's hard not to get a little caught up in the steamy romantic tension between Rey and Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi.
Don't be afraid. I feel it too.
We get a real chemistry between the two, as they each try to turn the other to their side through a series of long-distance Force chats. She gets to see him shirtless, and they even intimately touch hands. To Rey, Kylo Ren is Ben Solo, and Adam Driver looks at Daisy Ridley with a sad longing that reveals a whole other side to Kylo beyond the bratty anger he shows to everyone else. At the end of The Last Jedi, Rey has to shut herself off from Kylo, mentally closing the door on their special Force connection, which makes us a little sad, because we were starting to get on board with the Reylo shippers, even though we know the movie was never gonna let them get together. They can't just suddenly be on the same side of the Force. What kind of conflict would that give us for the next movie?
Where are you, Kylo Ren?
Here I am.
But that isn't even the real reason that we knew it wasn't going to work out. We knew because love never works out in Star Wars. Which brings us to our big question. Why don't couples ever get a happy ending in Star Wars? Is love just doomed in this universe? There are a few more couples outside of the movies, but in the Star Wars movies, we've yet to see a couple stay together for the long haul. Unless you count our brief glimpse of Luke's aunt and uncle before they're killed. Even Han and Leia don't grow old together.
I've always hated watching you leave.
There is real love in Star Wars, but love is more of a moment than a lifetime partnership. Partly this is due to pragmatic reasons. If you're constantly fighting off the evil empire, thinking you'll die at any second, trying to stop your son from murdering everyone and make long-distance work when you're literally light years apart, date nights aren't going to be the priority. But there are also a number of deeper reasons why passionate love just doesn't work in Star Wars. The emotionally charged looks between Ben Solo and Rey make us think back to the passion of Anakin and Padme, which wasn't as successful of an on-screen chemistry, but nevertheless. Like Anakin and Padme, Kylo and Rey are drawn to each other because they're polar opposites. The Force is all about balance, made up of strong bonds between opposites, so there's a deep attraction between intense darkness and intense light. Even Han and Leia fall for each other partly due to how different they are.
When you aren't acting like a scoundrel.
Scoundrel?
And their friction is what makes their flirtation so satisfying.
I like the sound of that.
You still want to kill me?
That happens when you're being hunted by a creature in a mask.
The connection that's possible between Kylo and Rey at this moment when they're still forming their adult identities reminds us that opposite things can start out very similar, very close together, even though they end up very far apart. Snoke says he knew that as Kylo's darkness became more powerful in the universe, a corresponding light would rise. A ray of light, if you will.
Darkness rises, and light to meet it.
So Rey and Kylo are each other's equivalents. They're almost like soulmates, the way they can see into each other.
You imagine an ocean. I see it.
No one else can understand the intensity of their powers and burdens.
You're so lonely.
Being so perfectly opposite, they feel more connected to each other than to anyone else. But the thing that draws them together is also the reason they can't stay together. Anakin's and Padme's relationship falls apart because for both of them, their connection to the Force comes first. When Anakin has this prophetic fear that Padme is going to die in childbirth, he turns to the dark side to try to prevent this from happening.
You're breaking my heart. You're going down a path I can't follow.
Later, when she asks him to reject the dark side,
Stop! Stop now! Come back! I love you!
Liar!
His rage leads him to almost kill her himself, proving that even though she was the justification for his actions, by now the dark side is more important to him than she is. And the same dynamic is now true for Kylo and Rey. Their personal relationships to the Force come before romance. Even for Han and Leia, the will of the Force ultimately was more powerful than what the couple felt. Their son turning to the dark side drove them apart, so the Force had its own plans for their future. In Star Wars, romantic love just isn't the most important thing.
All I want is your love.
Love won't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that.
One way to make all of this clearer is to distinguish between different types of love, and the ancient Greeks had some very handy words for talking about different kinds of love. So their word for sexual romantic love was one that we still use today, eros. The ancient Greeks believed eros wasn't likely to last and wasn't necessarily a good thing. It can take over a person and make them lose control. Excessively strong emotions are a path to the dark side, and Anakin's strong feelings for Padme allow Palpatine to manipulate him. Volatile eros is also the attraction we see between Kylo and Rey. By the end, he wants to shoot her in the Millennium Falcon out of the sky. He's gone from passion for her to passion for destroying her, which is classic Kylo. We were already getting signs that he was not going to be the most positive boyfriend for Rey. As Vanity Fair pointed out, he nags her with those statements about how she's a nobody because of who her parents are, but not a nobody to him. And this attempt to feed on low self-esteem is a real alarm bell. Apart from eros, the other kind of love that can be dangerous in Star Wars is self-love. The ancient Greeks called it philautia, and they said it had both a healthy and an unhealthy form. Those on the dark side are full of unhealthy self-love.
Protection is a job for local security, not Jedi.
They put their ambitions for fame and power above all else. And while eros is a temptation for both Anakin and Ben Solo, they ultimately choose to love themselves the most. Meanwhile, Rey is developing a healthy self-love by not falling for Kylo's attempts to diminish her.
You, the scavenger. You know I can take whatever I want.
And that healthy self-love is part of the basis for becoming a stable Jedi. The ancient Greeks had the word pragma for long-term partnership love, which is what we don't get much of in Star Wars due to the volatility of all these people's lives. The most central kind of love in Star Wars is the Greek concept of agape. In Star Wars, it's this love and concern for the good of all people that's most important. The community comes before the heart. So theoretically, you could have a solid romantic bond between two individuals who share a commitment to their community. That's what Han and Leia have for a while. But even then, the bigger community demands are probably going to come between the couple. And for the most part, because opposites attract so strongly in Star Wars, romance tends to be a destructive temptation in conflict with community goals. Eros isn't even the second most important kind of love in Star Wars. After agape, the most important is philia, or friend love. In the original trilogy, Luke's and Han's friendship is just as underlined, if not more so, than Han's and Leia's romance. And even though Han and Leia separate, Han and Chewie, as the best of friends, do stay together for life. Taking all of these different kinds of love together, we can see that ultimately Kylo was a dangerous test that Rey passed during her training. Just as Luke had to overcome the trap of his strong feelings he had concerning his father. Rey's talking to Kylo at the same time that she's being drawn to that pit underground, which represents the pull of the dark side. And when Rey sees versions of herself in the mirror, this even recalls when Luke saw his own face in Vader's mask. A Jedi needs to be close to the will of the Force above all else, and passionate emotion of this magnitude could only unbalance Rey. A scene near the end of The Last Jedi raises more questions about the romantic future of these characters. With a brief glance, Rey observes the new connection developing between Finn and Rose. And that makes us think of Luke witnessing Leia's feelings for Han. Finn's and Rey's fierce devotion to each other feels more and more like a platonic Luke and Leia style love. And this Last Jedi scene where Rey's observing this corresponds to the scene at the end of Empire Strikes Back, where Luke and Leia looked out on their future as brother and sister, and Luke's very aware that Leia is clearly thinking about Han. So if Rey is the Luke of this trilogy, and Poe Dameron is the Han Solo, clearly, given his charming swagger, that makes Finn sort of the Leia, who loves Rey/Luke dearly as a sibling figure, but develops a different romantic attraction that's a total surprise even to himself. The end scene also shows Poe and Rey finally meeting. For a quick moment, we're definitely wondering if this is setting up a potential romance there. Although, that would be like putting this trilogy's Luke and Han together. But clearly these cards are being reshuffled a bit, and we're not gonna get a direct repeat of the old stuff. Anyway, however much we enjoyed Kylo gazing longingly at Rey, we all just have to leave that behind us and get ready for the next battle between them. The best we could hope for is that the couple somehow reunites long enough to conceive a really awesome baby, but Reylo growing old together is just not in the cards.
I'm being torn apart. I want to be free of this pain. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Thanks for watching, and if you like our videos, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just click this link here. We spend a lot of time making these videos, and every little bit helps. And of course, the very best thing you can do is subscribe to our channel to get access to all of our latest videos.